Hello. Hello, hello. So a little game of what's in the bowl. It's something that may well be your favourite thing in the whole world. It's something that entire civilizations have obsessed over. And it's the most widely eaten nut in the world. If you haven't guessed, it is chocolate. We love chocolate. When I say that word, chocolate, what comes to mind? Do you think of it as a delicious treat food that might be a little bit naughty? Do you think of it as a health food, a superfood? Or do you think of it as a sacred food? Well, for me in my life, chocolate has actually been all three of those things. In fact, it's become, for me, a medicine and, strangely, a great teacher in my life. So, how the hell did I arrive at that, chocolate being a teacher in my life? In order to explain that a little bit further, we need to do some facts. We hear terms like chocolate, cacao, cocoa. What the hell do they all mean? Well, chocolate grows on trees. It grows on a Theobroma cacao tree, and it grows in a big pod. And when you harvest the cacao, you take the pod off the tree, you open it, and inside it's full of nuts. And inside those nuts are what we call cacao nibs. And that's the substance from which all chocolate is made. Cacao nibs is then roasted and fermented, and that's where you arrive at cocoa, and then you take the cocoa and you turn that into chocolate. The words are interesting too. Theobroma cacao. Theobroma comes from the Greek theos, which means gods, and broma, which means food. So chocolate literally translates as food of the gods. The actual word cacao is one of the oldest words in continual human use, still used right across the globe today. It's an Olmec word from 1500 BC. So, to get into the story about how the hell cacao became my teacher, I'm going to tell the story in the four directions. And I'm going to start right here in the direction of the east. The east is the direction of the rising sun, the direction of golden light. So, my chocolate journey started like a lot of kids in the 80s. I used to jump on my BMX, hoon up to the corner shops with 20 cents in my back pocket, and rock up to the mixed lollies counter. Now, a lot of you would have had that experience, and some of you would have gone for the musk sticks and the mint leaves. Not my jam. I went straight to the chocolate end. Remember the little chocolate freckles and chocolate buds? That was my whole mixed lolly bag. It was nothing but chocolate. And then that Willy Wonka movie came out, the first one, the Gene Wilder one. Everyone's seen that, probably? I was obsessed with that movie. I think I must have watched it 100 times. So where does this obsession come from? This obsession that I had and that some of you might have with chocolate. Where does it come from? Well, in order to understand that a little bit further, we actually have to look at when humans first started using chocolate, which we have to go right back to the Olmecs, 1500 BC, where they were first using chocolate or cacao as a sacred ceremonial medicine. That's the first domestication. And around about the same time, the Mayans were also using cacao, but I found this book while I was doing the research for this talk called the Popol Vuh. And in that book, the Mayans talk about the creation of the universe, including cacao being completely involved in the creation of the sun and the moon. But further to that, in their creation story, the gods had 3 attempts at creating humans. Attempt number 1, they used mud, which not surprisingly didn't go fabulously, so giant flood, they got rid of that. Second attempt, they used wood, didn't go so well either. Third attempt, they used a bunch of different foods, one of which was cacao. And then the Aztecs, who came after the Mayans, they used cacao as a sacred medicine also, but interestingly, it was their currency. The Aztecs used cacao beans as money. So we can see that cacao has had way more than just a yummy, chocolatey sensibility to entire civilizations. It's actually been intrinsic to what it means to be human. Direction of the south. It's the direction of destruction. It's the direction of the serpent. So about 25 years ago, I was studying yoga. I was travelling back and forth to India. And one of the things with yoga is there ain't a lot of chocolate. In fact, there's just a lot of brown food, a lot of lentils and mung beans and dal, and it wasn't really my jam. So I started experimenting with my diet, and I started incorporating things like acai berries from the Brazilian Amazon and spirulina powder from the oceans of Hawaii. And then possibly the greatest discovery ever made, which is that chocolate became healthy again. So the superfood community realised that if you eat cacao like this in its raw form, it's off the charts, packed with nutrition. It's the highest plant source of magnesium. And further to that, it contains a whole lot of really interesting chemicals that create bliss states in your body. So anandamide is one of the chemicals that's in cacao. Ananda, the Sanskrit word, is bliss. So I simply had to be part of this. So I searched the world, seeking out the best chocolate, the best raw cacao I could find. And this led me all the way to Indonesia, where I started working with a cooperative of fair trade organic farmers in Indonesia. And I was bringing container loads of beautiful cacao into Australia, supplying all the masters of the industry. Gemma, who runs Naked Treaties, a really famous raw food cafe in Byron Bay, supplying her. And then disaster struck. Unfortunately, I couldn't get supply. And this meant that the business was on the skids. It massively impacted my marriage. My family home was on the line. And probably worst, my entire sense of myself and my identity started to crumble. And cacao, similarly, has had her own hard times. When the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés invaded Mexico, he encountered Montezuma, the Aztec king. And Montezuma was reportedly drinking 40 cups of cacao a day. And he had a store of, they say, up to 1 billion cacao beans. Because remember, it was the currency for the Aztecs. Obviously, the Spaniards thought there's got to be something in this cacao thing, so they started bringing it back to Europe. And for the past 500 years, cacao's really gone through a process of industrialisation, winding up in the kind of chocolate that we see today, often mixed with sugar and milk. And further to that, the real tragedy has been in the last couple of decades where child labour has been used in cacao production in West Africa. Direction of the West. Direction of strength and vitality. So I needed some healing. And amongst other things, I started working with an Andean wisdom lineage here in Australia. So they had connections to Peru. And I was sitting in ceremonies and meditations, and it had been great. And then one of the stranger things on my cacao journey happened. I mentioned before a woman called Gemma, who ran Naked Treaties in Byron Bay. Well, it turns out that Gem had been living with exactly the same wisdom lineage in Peru, training to be a medicine woman. And as part of Gem's training, she was using cacao as a medicine. So I reconnected with Gemma, started sitting in lots of cacao ceremonies, and actually apprenticed myself to Gemma. And this process of sitting in ceremony and sitting with cacao created a really profound and deep remembering. It was a remembering of an older, deeper part of myself. And the more that I was able to connect to that deeper part of myself, the more I was able to open my heart and start to heal. And this process has been good for Mama Cacao too, because as people have moved all around the world, there's thousands of people now attending cacao ceremonies, holding cacao ceremonies. She's once again being remembered by a lot of people as being this sacred medicine that it always was. And further to that, people aren't wanting to consume cacao that's come through non-ethical practices like child labour. So the entire supply chain of cacao is benefiting from this. Direction of the north, direction of the heart. So my journey with cacao has been a long journey, and really it's been a journey home to my heart, home to my wife, to my kids, and to my beautiful community. And cacao also has some good news. There was a study published just a couple of years ago in National Geographic which showed that cacao domestication, which means humans and cacao, may actually be up to 11,000 years ago, and that it occurred deep in the Amazon rather than on the coast in South America, pointing out that perhaps our relationship with cacao is much older and much deeper than we ever knew. So I'm going to leave you with an invitation. The invitation is that next time you sit in front of a delicious chocolate bar or a beautiful mug of cacao, bring some curiosity. Could this be the one that contains the golden ticket? Thanks.